Hey guys, I want to start talking about some different topics, but I figure I probably should do some sort of introductory video as to who I am and where I'm coming from, just so that you feel like you can relate maybe to me a little bit. But yeah, I hope that I can bring up some interesting topics, maybe things that resonate with you, things that I've been through, or ideas that I have about how things work in the world, and maybe we can have some interesting conversations. Definitely kind of afraid of the whole ego side of things getting in the way. More so worried about judgment and stuff like that. But you know what? Just got to get over it and do it. So I kind of felt this calling to start talking about things like ego and what I think ego is, and what the dark night of the soul and all these awakenings and things are, and how that kind of works, and why it's such a weird process in my opinion. So I guess I'll just start off saying I'm Randy Cunningham, Randy J. Cunningham. I am 20. I'm 35 years old. Not 20 anymore. Early 30s, mid 30s, whatever you want to call it. I don't get age. It's just a number. Born and raised in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. Now living in Ogden, Utah. Just moved earlier this year, and it's gorgeous. I love it here. Utah's really wonderful. A lot of outdoorsy type activities. I mean, hiking, mountain biking. I mean, they have that in Arizona too, but the weather's nicer here, so you can kind of do it more frequently and not have to worry so much about heat exhaustion and stuff like that. But it does seem there's a vibe in Utah that is just very much seems more self-care oriented, healthcare oriented, not so much big pharma type health, more like vitamins and nutrition and stuff like that, which I think is super, super important. So and I would hope y'all start to consider that as well. So I guess, where do I go? So I guess I should say, I like we all do in life. We've all been through different trials and tribulations and whatever you want to call it, different struggles, and so I don't know. It's funny because when you ask people about who they are, the first thing you ask is, oh, well, what do you do? What do you do? And so it's like, well, I am a musician. I love riding bikes. I love taking things apart and putting them back together. I'm a super positive person. I try to see the glass half full as much as I possibly can. So those are some of the things that I like. I play guitar, bass, lap steel, and trying to get some music going myself. But then, there's also the whole well, what do you do for work? And I have a kind of a weird touch and go relationship with what I do for work. But I work in aerospace. I saw, what was it? Astro Aerospace is what it's called. Oddly enough, I work on satellite manufacturing and actually supply chain, essentially. So I've been working in that capacity for years now, 14 years all together with the company that I've been with. And it's one of those things that, when you tell people about it, they're like, yeah, it's cool, right? Yeah, satellites, it's cool. But every job has lots of minutia that nobody knows about. And so, it is what it is. It's work. It's not something you do for pleasure. It's something you do to, either for a cause or to bring home a paycheck. And so that's what I do for work is supply chain planning for a company. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a degree, so let's get that out of the way. I never graduated college. I've taken some courses, done a ton of research on my own outside of college, but more so on fringe things like electrodynamics and a lot of stuff that they probably won't teach you in college because it's, I don't know, fringe or whatever, but it's not the accepted status quo, whatever. So, but yeah, I basically just got a job there. I was working 2 jobs at the time. I was working at Home Depot overnight full-time for a while, and then I was working at another manufacturing facility. It's like more of a warehouse position. And I told my uncle, and it was kind of funny, and I hope he remembers because, he's kind of the inspiration. One of those people who's like, you're not going to do that, And maybe I think it was more so a like kick in the butt, like, yeah, if you're going to do it. But I told him I'm going to get a job that pays me X amount, and, I won't have to work these 2 jobs anymore. And so I'm like screwing around on Craigslist or whatever. I literally got my job on Craigslist through a contract position, but found a position in one of the positions I applied for was like rocket refurbishment, because the factory that I worked for in Chandler was a rocket factory for orbital sciences. And so I applied for a position, and then they recommended me for something else that was in production control. So like kitting and making sure that the kits get through manufacturing and things like that. So I got an interview. I had this really long goatee, and I had hair like, down to my hips or whatever. I had, was really into heavy metal and stuff like that back then. And I shaved off my goatee for the interview, and I kept my hair in a ponytail, and I showed up in like jeans and a, plaid shirt, whatever. And I got the job, and that was pretty cool. It was definitely a learning experience for me. Met a lot of really nice people, really cool people. I overall in my career with these companies, nothing but good things to say about most of the people. And it's odd that some of the people that I've dealt with and didn't quite jive with ended up getting walked out for very odd reasons. So vibes are a thing, like we all have to pay attention to them. And I try really hard not to judge anybody. I don't want to be judged myself. I don't judge a book by its cover. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know where I've come from. So don't judge me just by my looks alone. And I try to do that myself. We all get caught up in things at times, but it is interesting where, you get a vibe from somebody, you don't get along with them or whatever the case is, you work with them enough and it's just, always butting heads. And then that person gets, let go from the company or escorted out by the police, and then they come up on the news and, some crazy allegations, and it's intense. But anyways, that's totally off in a different direction than kind of where I was going. So yeah, worked in aerospace, don't have a degree, went back to college a couple times, way too sidetracked with other things, so I kind of gave up on college at the time. I still might eventually go back. I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. I can learn anything I want to know outside of college, and I have enough job experience that I can, reasonably, I can get a job if I need to that way. But there's just some things about college that I don't exactly agree with. Having to pay for information is very interesting. It's an interesting premise. I mean, I understand that you're paying to be taught the information, and then you're paying to be accredited that you know and you have retained the information. But it's just kind of and I think you're also paying for the information, you're paying for the experience that you're accredited, and you're also showing the initiative that you were able to stick to something for 4 years or 6 years or 8 years or whatever. I totally get that. And like I said, my work history kind of comes into play for that. But yeah, college it's just, I'd go for a specific area, but to do all of it, it seems like a lot of work for a little reward. So that's just my opinion, Everybody's got an opinion. But So yeah, no college, working in supply chain. I feel like I'd like to move in the direction of consulting, manufacturing. Whether it's I mean, I've spent so much time in manufacturing. I've seen it done well. I've seen it done really bad. I know a lot of the things that we struggle with, and I have a lot of insight with that and ideas for how to make it better. But there's a lot of roadblocks, a lot of hurdles to get over to make things better. So I'd like to get into consulting if eventually, but that's one of those leaps that's gonna when you have a family like I do. I have a 5-year-old son and a wife to take care of. You have to balance, or a risk and reward type of balance. So there's that. So a little bit about me now. So I guess to start from like when I was really young, I want to say this that I always kind of felt like it's like Terrence McKenna has a saying that's like, culture is not your friend. I always had this kind of thought in the back of my head, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's intuition or something like that, but I was leery of like following the crowd and following others and stuff like that. I've kind of been a loner a lot of my life. I've had good friends, but never really like followed a crowd necessarily. And so that I wanted to be part of the crowd, so I'd make up my own things and pretend like I had something going, and I caught a lot of shit for that, from friends and stuff, but it is what it is. It's just, I was an odd kid, I guess. I don't know. I made up my own, like a one-man wolf pack, but I mean, I had friends, but we used to, ride bikes all over the neighborhood and skateboard and stuff, all that really important stuff you do when you're in elementary school and stuff. And then you get caught up in friends and stuff in junior high, and then it gets different, and then you start working in high school, and so your life diverts away from caring about having friends to caring about having money and all that stuff. So, but yeah, I always had this feeling that like I needed to avoid certain things, and I still have to this day. I mean, there's certain things that I've gone full tilt into, and then there's other things where I've completely avoided doing them or being associated with them. I guess for whatever reason this pops into my head, but one of the first memories I have going into school when I was a kid was like when they show you these little like what do you want to call them, like geometric shapes that are like little blocks, and they're the first thing I want to do is build stuff out of those, in 2-dimensional, but like make pictures, like mosaics, basically like tiles. And I just remember that being like, I was fascinated. I just wanted to do that and nothing else, and I'm like in like first grade or something like that. I don't remember what grade it was. Might have been kindergarten, but I have an artistic mind, but I've also, for whatever reason, decided to, follow this other track away from art, whenever it came up. So I've not been successful in art or music or things like that. And whatever. Not to say that I'm not a good guitar player or anything like that, or that I couldn't be successful. It's just a mindset, and it's a mindset that I haven't been able to get over, Like I wanted to go to a guitar lutherie school when I was in high school. It was like one of my, like, the epitome of what I wanted to do, and talked to my dad about it, and he's like, man, you're not gonna make any money doing that. And so I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And didn't really fight for that dream I had of like building guitars. And yeah, it would be hard to make a living doing that, but doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile activity, just like anything. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, just kind of rambling about myself, but like I said, kind of like a one-man wolf pack. But I guess getting out of high school, and being in bands and you know, being around people doing certain things extracurricularly, like drugs and alcohol and stuff. I wasn't into drugs. I didn't really, they didn't hit me right. I've dabbled, but it always basically, I was super paranoid. And so basically I became the drinker of the group of friends at a pretty young age. So like, you know, for whatever reason, whenever you go somewhere to hang out with friends, there's, you know, someone always has like a bottle of Jack Daniels, and then everybody else is smoking or doing whatever they're doing. And so I was the guy who could chug Jack Daniels, and everybody would laugh, and I'd be like, hey, you know, and that was my life for probably 10 years, you know, maybe not quite 10 years. But I fell hard, you know. It was like I culture wasn't my friend for a while, and then I made a hard right into just drinking all the time, and it being my priority. And I don't think I was ever even really an alcoholic, but I didn't know anything about other priorities, you know. Like at 19, you know, my girlfriend and I moved out into our own apartment, and you know, so we were doing it, we were living and working and stuff like that, but just, you know, took a hard right into using substances, and you know, I guess taking on that character of being like the clown in your friend circle, you know, like the guy who gets drunk and everybody laughs at, and you know, like that's just, you just accept it, you know. It becomes this like role, or this mask that you wear, you know, not that you want to, or you know, and then you look back on a night you like blacked out drunk, and all you can do is like laugh at yourself and shake your head, but you know, it's like you don't want to be that guy, but you're already that guy, you know. So trying to think of, you know, that's a big pause. I was trying to think of like like the linear progress of things, but anyways, like I said, not really into drugs or anything like that. But you know, you meet certain people and you learn new things, and people challenge you to either be better, or you know, to try different things, you know, experience different things and stuff like that. So you know, at a certain point, you know, my relationship with my girlfriend and or wife, you know, she became my wife, which is actually, you know, from high school, girlfriend became my wife. You know, my grandmother died in 2012, which was really, really hard, you know, because she was like, you know, she was there for me all the time. I lived with her for most of, I think, into junior high. She was, you know, my mom would work overnights, shifts or whatever, and my grandma would be there when we got home from school. So it was just like, you know, almost like a mom, you know, whatever. I wouldn't call her mom, but you know, she was there all the time. And she passed away the year that Stacey and I got married. So we had our wedding in her backyard, and then months later, cancer, you know, got the best of her. So there's that. So that was really difficult. At the time, I was still playing in bands and trying, at this point, I was in a band that I was way more serious about, but still, you know, it wasn't my thing. It was, you know, me playing someone else's stuff. Like, I mean, I was a part of the band. I wrote all the guitar and things like that, but just, I just, you know, I wasn't all in, you know, and I guess at that point, I didn't know how to be all in. You know, very distracted, you know, all the time, you know, just running from one place to another. And I feel like that's kind of how Phoenix is. I mean, it doesn't mean that, you know, you can avoid doing that. You can slow down, but there are certain places, I imagine, where you live where everybody's rushing around, you know. And Alan Watts talks about that, you know. It's like everybody's rushing around to make this thing, and you got to do it, and they don't realize that, like, this moment is all you have. Like, you know, the past, you know, you have to let go of it because it happened. You know, it happened. Forgive yourself and everybody else and move forward. But the future, there's no amount of anxiety that's going to change the future either. Right now, this moment, the tone of the bell is the happening. It's happening right now. And so kind of coming to realizations about all this stuff and being a drunk, and it was like really like touch and go. Like I said, I'm not an alcoholic. I never was an alcoholic. I don't think I was one of those people who, when I wanted to party, that's when it would be like a landslide down into blackout mode, and it was probably the hardest on my wife, because she had to deal with me, and I wasn't a nice person to her. I'm not gonna pretend like I was. I definitely was not mean to her. I think part of it was, I don't know, there was a part of me that I didn't love myself. I didn't have much self-respect. I was on a very like, don't give any, no cares, and self-destruction, basically is kind of, I had resorted to that for a while. Even though I was still doing good, I was still carrying on the same job, still doing good at work, doing well in music, doing well in things, but for whatever reason, there was this thing inside me where I used alcohol to just push away all my problems, and looking in the mirror, and all of the self-assessment I needed to do for myself. And it kind of came to a point, of like getting lost in this, like who am I? What is this? Kind of the dark night of the soul thing. And one of the other triggers for me is, like, I was in junior high when the September 11th happened, and I found out not too long after that about the whole like Loose Change documentary, and the fact that it was likely, I don't want to say that 9/11 was an inside job. I don't know the background, on the governmental side of things, but it's definitely fishy looking. Like, there's no ifs, ands, buts, doubts that that September 11th, there had to have been a cataclysmic, failure in a lot of things in order for that to happen the way that it did. Otherwise, things were allowed to happen for whatever reason. And so I kind of, at some point with work, I came back into that realization that I had just like been off on this, drunken, like wasting time for a long time, and prioritizing a lot of stuff that really didn't need to be my priority. And I mean, I had fun. I'm not a bad person. I just had, shitty priorities, I guess. Definitely was avoiding myself, avoiding assessing myself. Every time you look in the mirror, you flex, and you don't, or you just avoid looking in the mirror altogether. It's kind of a weird, I don't know if other people do that. I'm speaking for myself, but I definitely had that, where I had to come to terms with it. I think, you think all these things about the world, and you think all these things about other people. You kind of come to this point where you have to say those things in the mirror, think about those things in the mirror, and like try to digest it or let go of those ideas that you have that are just, either good, bad, otherwise, whatever. But, I think we're all way too much in our head. And I'm not the only person who thinks that. I know Terrence McKenna says that too. But so in my journey, I came to this point where I didn't want to abuse alcohol anymore. I was in a really crappy place in my relationship with myself and my wife. I was avoiding myself. I was avoiding her. I was avoiding a lot of things, and also just trapped in this like wanting other stuff, wanting to be somewhere else, wanting these things, wanting that, like, and that's a really crappy place to put yourself in, where you don't care about what you have, and you want that other thing, that grass is greener over there, and that's just a really bad place to put yourself. So, you know, I'm not a suicidal person necessarily, but there's definitely, you know, some thoughts about, you know, feeling completely worthless, where, you know, you're like, man, it would be way easier for me just to go find a nice spot out in the desert and say peace and you know, call it good, call it a day. And I didn't want to do that, you know, but there were definitely times that it seemed like, you know, an enticing idea. But my wife and I ended up going to marriage counseling, and through other friends I found out about, you know, I started looking into alternative modes of dealing with stuff, right? So kind of got into the idea that psychedelics would be a good thing to try to help me deal with my problems. And, you know, went down the whole rabbit hole of Terence McKenna's, you know, lectures, and Alan Watts lectures, which I love Alan Watts. I'm not going to talk any bad stuff about Alan Watts. I think he changed my life for the better. I love Terence McKenna too. I think was a wonderful soul and had a lot of interesting things to say. But I'm on a different place. I'm in a different place now than I was when I was, you know, pretty much decided that psychedelics were the only way to get through all this stuff, you know. But for me, it came down to having some experiences, but also realizing that it's just another substance, you know. Alcohol is a beverage, and what it does for me personally is it pushes all of my problems to tomorrow. It makes, you know, pushes my problems to tomorrow. It's like just trying to put room between yourself and your issues instead of feeling them and delving into them and working through them. And so all the pain and you know, agony I had for myself, I really do feel like, you know, addiction itself is basically, I have a really good way of saying this, and obviously I'm not going to remember it right this moment, but it's damn it, I can't remember. Addiction is basically, it's vacuous, like, I'm gonna have to edit this out. I don't want to edit this video though. It's a vacuous place to put yourself, but it's self-pity. That's what it is. Addiction is basically vacuous self-pity, but it's not this kind of self-pity that's like, oh, woe is me. It's like it's perpetual. It just gets worse and worse, you know. So you give in to yourself and you drink or whatever, and then you wake up the next morning and you feel like garbage, and all your problems are still there, and it's just this like really like low down, like you get into this rut of living like down here, you know, and like, you know, living straight is right here, and you know, you can climb up, but you know, that rock, you know, I don't know what you call it, rock bottom or whatever, but just getting into this like comfort, like, I want to be in this comfort zone down here, you know, and you become like a curmudgeon and you're using alcohol to push away all your problems, and then, you know, and so then I try to, you know, I go down this enlightened path, but, you know, like I said, my relationship was falling apart with my wife, and, you know, and I don't blame her because I was a jerk, you know. It's like, I would whine about, you know, needing alcohol, and it's crazy. It's to look back, it's like, you know, you put yourself in this position to look like a, you know, a toddler, but, you know, it's probably that, you know, there's that child inside of you that is hurt and it needs to be healed, and you don't know what you're doing, you know. So it's just like you want all these things, but you don't want to work for them. You don't want to properly take the steps to get to where you need to go to get the stuff you want. You're just pushing all your problems away. And so I did one high dose of psilocybin, and I'm not advocating this type of stuff. I think if you do enough research and you use intention and you're prepared, it can help people. And I will say, like, the most beneficial thing I think of psilocybin is it's like, it can be almost like a near-death experience, depending on how you do it or what, but it also leaves you with this like afterglow feeling of just feeling good for a few days. And that's probably why microdosing works, because I think it's kind of the same thing on a very smaller level. I don't think that there's any problem with psychedelics. At one point, when my wife and I were in therapy and we were basically going to be separated, I thought that was my new religion, like I thought psychedelics were it, like I said, Terrence McKenna, preaches it. I had a little bit of experience with it. It's definitely profound, but it's also another substance, like I said. And you get into these circles of people who are enlightened and they use ayahuasca and they use mushrooms and things like that. And then they sit around and torch weed and they, it's like they use hape or rape or whatever you want to call it, where it's, it's like a snuff tobacco that you ground yourself with. I've just seen people abuse all of these things, you can abuse humans will addict to anything. That's something that Terrence McKenna talks about. We addict to people, we addict to food, we addict to anything, and it really comes down to comfort. You want to be comfortable, so you addict to these things because they give you comfort. And that's where, eventually in your journey, you got to get to this point where you're comfortable being uncomfortable, because comfort isn't good. It's sedentary. It's where disease grows. It's not, the pot of gold at the end of the tunnel, rainbow or whatever you call it. I don't know why I said that, but anyways, so yeah, that's kind of been my journey, is going into alcohol, not having a whole lot of love for myself, which, my wife and I both had problems that from our childhood that we brought into our relationship, didn't understand how to get through it, went through 7 months of therapy, which was fantastic. It helped a lot later, but when you're in that hurt point of your life, and there's that saying that hurt people, and that's absolutely true. 100% absolutely true. It's so hard to see the truth when you're being the victim and you're seeing, the person who hurt you over there. And, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just, I guess, trying to bring you into my world and show you where I'm coming from with certain things. But, we all have to realize, how hurt we are, what are those wounds from your childhood? What, in my experience, like, there's lessons I should have learned that I turned into traumas, and then I held on to until I was well into adulthood. I still think about those things. I still thought about those things until I gave myself acceptance and released those things, going like, dude, all you needed to do was do this, like you should have learned that. But no, you've been holding on to this for 30 years because you did this and that's what happened, and you felt like you were that, but you aren't that. It was an experience that you should have learned from. And like I said, I don't know if I'm the only person, but it's definitely been part of my journey is getting through all that stuff. So my wife and I got divorced. We had I think my son was 1 year old at the time. She moved to Utah with her parents, and I stayed in Arizona, and got worse than better. Had to deal with all of this stuff in Arizona, ended up selling our house, you know. I knew that basically it didn't really matter what amount of money or things I had. It wasn't going to replace the time that I would have with my son. There's no amount of things that were going to fill that void. And I ended up, you know, I don't want to say I did it anyways intentionally, but we sold our house, split the money. I got money, you know, didn't intentionally go out and buy a bunch of guitars, but I ended up buying a bunch of guitars. You know, I did end up buying a new car because the car that I had was trash, and you know, and I was going to be going back and forth from Arizona to Utah, so ended up buying a car, and you know, just buying a bunch of, you know, I had a bunch of motorcycles. I had all this shit, you know, and that's the other thing. Like, I was talking to a friend last night about, you know, I had this realization at one point when I was living in the house with my wife. There was one point where our garage was just, we had taken some bookshelves out of our room. When we bought the house, there was like 2/3 of the 2/4, half, holy shit, 2 walls in one of the rooms were covered in bookshelves from floor to ceiling. Sorry, Jesus, it'll take a long way around that one. And so we were like, yeah, let's take out, you know, one of these walls, because it cut the corner too, so it was like, it made the room really small. So I had these gigantic IKEA bookshelves, like floor to ceiling, in my garage with everything else we had in there, and it was just a disaster. And I came in one day from the garage, and I was just, you know, already feeling like, you know, personally, I was just weighed down with so much shit. And, you know, I look at my dog. I had a puppy named Harvey, and he was an American Bulldog dog. And I look at him, and he just, you know, he just does the normal dog thing where he looks at you, his ears perk up, and his tail kind of wags or whatever. And I'm like, what are you so happy about? You have nothing, you know? And I said those words to him, and it was like, punched me in the face. I was just like, I would be happier without all of this shit. You know what I mean? I'd be happier with less. I would be happier to feel clean, you know? So you get these little insights from time to time, and they just, you know, it takes time to kind of know where it's all going. And, you know, I saw this quote recently that says basically, like, if you know where you're going, if you know where the path is leading you, you're probably on somebody else's path, because the path is just, you stumble across it, you know? And I don't know, I hope that gave a little insight. I didn't mean to make this incredibly long. I might edit some of this out just for the sake of time. But I do want to delve into a thought that I have about all of us dealing with ego, and that is something that I guess I'm calling the Truman paradox. And essentially the message is that the whole modern world enforces us all to have ego, and whether it was intelligently designed or, you know, just happened to come across this way, you know, the modern world and the matrix is ego. False ego, I should say. It's false ego, because we all have ego aside from false ego. And true ego, I believe, is our fight or flight reflex. And it's a survival mechanism built into you. You cannot get rid of it. There's no amount of psychedelics that will smash that part of you. You know, it's a reflex. But it also, you know, being self-aware, it becomes calcified. And, you know, that's, if you look at advertising and all of these things, they pander to your innate self-protection, but they pander to yourself, right? So they make you think you need certain things. They make you think that, or they try to portray a story to you really, they don't want you to know yourself. They don't want you to live now. You know, they want you to be in trauma so that you can, you know, look for comfort and everything elsewhere outside of yourself. And I'm not trying to say that everybody does this. I don't think it's conscious. You know, I don't think people do consciously do this. And that's kind of part of the problem. It's subconscious. It's almost metaphysical. Like but that's the thing. So I'll try to get like an outline and have a better spiel for that on the next video that I'm going to do. So thanks for hanging with me, and yeah, we'll chat again soon. Peace.